I have the backbone controller for Android here, and in today's video I'll be testing a hardware mod to see if we can use phones with this thing without having to take them out of the case. At the end of last week I did an unboxing and first impressions video of the backbone controller here. This was something that I have had my eye on for a while, and I had waited for them to release a product for Android devices. Overall, I have enjoyed the build quality of this controller, as it feels sturdy in the hand and does not rattle. However, I do like to keep my phone in a TPU case, which has caused conflicts when wanting to play something with the controller. The phones I have tested so far fit just fine in the backbone controller for Android, as long as I remove them from the case first. But I would rather have a way to just insert the phone into the controller without having to remove them from the case. If we take a look at the controller here, we can see that they have put in rubber pads on both sides. I can understand these being useful to help keep the phone more snug while playing. And this would also help to prevent the controller from scratching the phone during more eventful play sessions. Which is great if you're not a fan of using a case, but for me, I keep my smartphones in a case to protect them and don't see a need for these to be on the controller itself. I would have liked to see these rubber pads be optional and easily removable, but they are glued in here and do not just slip out of the controller. However, when I looked up ways to use a phone in this controller with a case, I found that some people were able to achieve this by removing these pads. These aren't made to be removed, but I do believe that they can be pried off with a small screwdriver like this and a bit of force. But before you try to do this, I do want to point out that many people have switched to using an ultra thin case on their phone, and as long as the case is thin enough, it should fit inside the backbone controller without having to be removed. I tend to avoid these types of cases since I need the added protection for the times when I accidentally drop the smartphone. But if you're willing to switch to a case like that, then you may not need to remove these pads here. I did read that this removal process would be easier if you use something like a hair dryer to weaken the glue, but that shouldn't be required. Since it's only attached to the controller with a bit of glue, using a small pry tool like this should be enough. So you're just going to want to take a pry tool or a little screwdriver and wedge it between the pad and the controller itself. Just do a little wiggle back and forth, and you should hear the glue start to loosen. Just go from one side to the other. And that should loosen it enough so that it can be pulled off completely. You may end up with a little bit of glue residue on the controller itself, but some rubbing alcohol and a Q-tip will be able to clean that off very easily. We're going to turn the controller around and do the same thing with this side. Again, there's no need to be in a hurry about this. Just slowly wedge up underneath the pad. Rock the pry tool or the screwdriver back and forth. And then once you have enough of it pulled up, you can see it just comes off like that. So as I mentioned before, if you notice that there's some glue left on the controller, we can just dip a Q-tip into some rubbing alcohol, rub that back and forth on the controller where the glue is, and you should see it start to eat away at that glue and loosen up at least enough to where it can be removed by wiping it dry with a towel. I have also read that hand sanitizer is also a good alternative if you do not have any rubbing alcohol. Now that we have removed these two big pads from the backbone controller, let's test my Galaxy S23 to see if it's able to connect while staying in the Spigen case that I have for it. You can see it fits in there very easily. And we can test it with the same game that I used in my first impressions video. And while it does seem to fit, at least the USB cable is trying to be inserted into the Galaxy S23, it seems the connection is not quite good enough, as we're not getting any response from the controller. If I remove this from the case, it does still work. However, with the case, the USB plug is not able to go far enough into the Galaxy S23. However, I am able to connect my Poco F2 Pro to the backbone controller while it is in the Spigen case, and it is able to connect. So just like the regular compatibility with the backbone controller, being able to use this with a case and the hardware modification is going to be hit or miss depending on the device's thickness, and the controller, as well as the controller's thickness. The Galaxy S21 Ultra that I have was too wide for it to fit in the backbone controller for Android while it's in the case. However, the Pixel 7 Pro here that I have in this case as well does seem to work. So I would like to point out that if you are still having trouble connecting a smartphone to the backbone controller while it's in a case, even after you have removed the rubber pads, that there is also a small rubber strip right here on the top side of both ends of the controller that you can try to remove again with the same pry tool to see if that helps make that connection secure enough for it to work. So this rubber piece right here was much more difficult to get off, mainly because it's actually embedded into the controller itself. Using a small pry tool like this, I was only able to get small bits and pieces of it off and out. However, once I started to pry it away with some tweezers, I was then able to get the rest of that strip. And with that done, now when I try to fit the Samsung Galaxy S23 into the backbone controller on Android, it does actually work. I didn't need to remove that strip on this side, but again, you may need to, depending on the device you are using and the case that you are using. So definitely not the best solution, but if you are a fan of cases, then this hardware mod for the backbone controller may be your best bet. At the very least, it will offer more compatibility with Android cases than if you had chosen to not remove these rubber pads. I have yet to find a list of compatible devices that fit in the backbone controller for Android. And this is especially true with the hardware modification. But I have been working on a new website lately, so maybe this is something that I can put together for the community. Let me know if this is something you would be interested in down in the comments section below.